Hello! Yeah, another Discworld video. A lot of you have been asking me to do this, and frankly, the only reason I haven't been doing it already is that it's been a very tricky one to make for a number of different reasons. First of all, for anyone watching in the future, it was between my last Discworld video and this one that Terry Pratchett actually died. And we're all extremely sad about that. Terry Pratchett was someone we were all sort of getting round to eventually meeting, or meeting again if we'd already got round to it, and now we never will. I never did, so I never will, and it really doesn't matter how good or bad I happen to be at getting to Discworld conventions from now on. That is no longer a factor. Now, I would be tempted to do a sort of tribute video, but actually I've already done one. The first video in this series was kind of that, so if you want to go and see that, then feel free, there it is. And you can see me talking about what a pleasant bit of life his books have been for me. So none of that is why it took me this long to make the video. It was already quite difficult for me to make, and I've been putting it off. Reading the book, making the video, all of it. I put it all off for a reason. Today we are going to talk about adaptations. First of all, I would like you to think of a cartoon. One that's currently airing. Doesn't have to be one that you've even seen, just think of a cartoon that's popular right now. Okay? Okay, chances are the cartoon you just thought of was American, or, if you're that way inclined, Japanese. That's just where cartoons come from right now, but it wasn't always that way. If this was the 80s and the UK, and I asked you to think of a cartoon, then there'd be a good chance that the one that came straight to your mind would have been a British one. They weren't niche, and they weren't particularly sparse. Alright, America made the big, brash, visceral cartoons like Thundercats and He-Man and that sort of thing, but the bread and butter cartoons, the happy parts of life that we all just knew about and took for granted, the ones that felt like hopscotch and marbles, those cartoons, in 80s UK, those were British. The first ones that spring to mind, in retrospect, are Danger Mouse, recently rebooted, and Count Duckula, and both of those cartoons were by Cosgrove Hall, which is a pair of names extremely familiar to any 80s British kid, even if they couldn't necessarily have told you why. Now, there are lots more to mention, especially if you include stop-motion animation as cartoons, which in those days and here, they pretty much did. They were treated as roughly the same thing, but let's stick to Cosgrove Hall just for the time being, for the sake of argument. Because they are relevant to this topic, in 1992, they adapted the first Terry Pratchett book I'd ever read, Truckers, for children's ITV. I mentioned it in a previous video, and, believing it to be safely available on VHS only, I used a couple of clips for what I consider to be review purposes, but they immediately released it on DVD, and so you can assume that that's what happened on the day my channel is inevitably pulled. Anyway, their adaptation of Truckers was perfect, and I loved it, and I still love it. So really, I ought to have been looking forward to their take on Discworld in 1997. However, maybe I was just being a teenager at the time, going through a bit of a phase of being overly critical about cartoons. Or maybe Cosgrove Hall was actually on a bit of a downturn, but for whatever reason, I hadn't enjoyed the last few offerings from them that I'd seen, and what had once been a vital producer of great cartoons was starting to feel a bit tiresome to me, so perhaps I went in a bit overly critical. Either way, I didn't like their adaptation of Wyrd Sisters. It became a bit of a focal point, and if you like, punching bag for all my I'm too old for this teenage angst. My memory of it is of dodgy animation. You know the kind where people's faces and bodies squirm around a bit too much, and their heads do all these unnecessarily quick turns while they're talking that makes you think maybe they just didn't do the keyframe timing properly. An ugly art style, caught between realism and cartooning. The sort that feels a bit educational, a bit animated Shakespeare, and a voice cast who are a little bit on the wrong side of I'm in a cartoon, my voice has to be funny. It just rubbed me the wrong way, sorry. On this last point, the reason I didn't get along with the vocal performances, or their director presumably, is part of the reason I liked Truckers so much, and why I liked Truckers the book, and why I like Pratchett generally. Now, different readers have different takes on this, but mine is that Pratchett's humour in the Discworld series tends to stem from treating fantasy characters like real people, and I mean absolutely everyday, down-to-earth, grumbling people. Pratchett casts the ordinary people around him as wizards and assassins and knights and stuff like that, and then he has fun making them see their amazing lifestyle and surroundings in the same terms that a bored office worker looks at his inbox and the grey, roundabout traffic outside. At least in the more fantasy-leaning books, the ones they tend to adapt for things like this, when these characters have to make fantasy proclamations and heft swords in the air and so on, he has them do it with a shrug and a shuffle of feet as if it's just something annoying they have to get through. They face adventures the way we face organising a particularly complicated Christmas get-together, and they sail through the stars the way we traverse long and tedious motorways. So for me, the success successful Pratchett adaptations are things like Truckers, where all the characters feel pretty real, and the ones that don't are more than made up for by Joe McCann's fantastically real and ordinary Masklin, who's played perfectly as an ordinary bloke who'd rather just go back to normal life, but suddenly he has all these people looking up to him and stuff, as if he's expected to be a leader or something. And there was a version of Night Watch on Radio 4 several years ago that I can't remember anything about, except that Philip Jackson's version of Sam Vimes was absolutely pitch perfect and real, and I seem to remember that the TV version of Johnny and the Bomb was similarly got right. But Wyrd Sisters, to my memory, was not like that, and felt a lot more like the PC games, which I enjoyed, but have to be critical of the voice direction of. So you've got exaggerated nasal regional accents and several lines delivered as if they were gags, as if they were variety show gags, rather than what I think they are in the books, and perhaps I'm wrong, but I read them as like matter-of-fact comments that are funny because the character, and in many cases like all the characters in the book, don't realise they're funny. Now all of this, of course, is entirely my own personal leaning, and it's a matter of alignment with one particular directorial style over another, so it shouldn't be taken as objectively true. In fact, I'm pretty sure Annette Crosby is exactly the sort of person you should cast as Granny Weatherwax, and I imagine that that same performance that she did in Wyrd Sisters, I would have probably really loved it if it had happened to be in that Night Watch radio series or something like that. So I'm not saying I'm right here, but I am giving you the reasons why I'm very guarded now when it comes to Pratchett adaptations. As far as I'm concerned, a great number of them just simply don't understand the source material. Now, for anyone confused by my apparently having built up some grand idea of what Pratchett's books should be read like, despite having read only 5 of them so far, I ought to clarify by saying that I grew up reading his children's books, and I've read all the Tiffany Akings, and have at various points in my life read this and that Discworld book as well. I just can't remember them. What I do remember is, like, my response to the tone and the style and what kind of books they felt like. So I'm not even saying that the radio version of Night Watch was even a good adaptation of Night Watch. I mean, I haven't read the book. I just remember that it felt like my idea of what a Discworld adaptation should sort of feel like. Or at least I think so. I can't even remember it anymore, just my response to it. And my wife's, who has read all of the Discworld books, and she's a bit of a fan of the Sam Vimes stories, and, you know, she thought that he was a good Vimes as well. And all of this is why I want to read all the Discworld books properly, and why I'm using my channel to sort of push me on into doing it. Because the Discworld books are a hole in my life. I've built a special space for them and I've never filled it, so here we are. Anyway, all of this has been by way of explaining why it's taken me so long to get round to making this video, because the next Discworld book is Wyrd Sisters. And Wyrd Sisters is difficult for me to talk about. Firstly, because I didn't really find it to be a particularly memorable Discworld book. I didn't dislike it, I just came away with almost nothing to say about it. So I've gone in associating this story with, you know, the sort of thing I'm not really into, and I've come out without anything new to add, and if I'm honest, it's around here, not exactly here, but it's around here that I start flagging whenever I try and read the Discworld series. I've tried to do it before, just for fun, without sort of the responsibility of delivering videos to you about it. Round here in the series is roughly as far as I tend to get, and I think it might be because the animated series kind of, you know, put me off, and it's with this book that I start to flag and think, oh, I'm not so into this anymore. Now please understand, the series might be brilliant, I'm not saying it isn't. I'm saying that when I watched it, I was just in a place mentally where I wasn't able to enjoy it, and unfortunately that experience being my first experience of Wyrd Sisters, and I think of the Witches characters in general, it just put a bit of a black mark on Wyrd Sisters in my head. I think of it as a boring thing, and as I was reading it I was aware that there are books later in the series that I'm going to enjoy much more. So even though the book, by the way, was fine, I didn't find the book to be boring or anything, but I just knew it wasn't, that there was going to be ones I preferred, so it felt like a chore that I had to get through. Basically, while I was reading the first 5 books, I was kind of dreading this one, and that silly prejudice meant that I kind of didn't really connect with the book. Silly, aren't I? So I just don't have much to say about it. Now, what I can say about it is that the part of me that isn't mired in this silly prejudice did enjoy this Discworld book just about as much as any other. There was lots in it to like, and I really can't justify my inability to connect with it, which is why I've assumed that it's to do with my previous experience, and that's why I've told you about it. This is why I don't, by the way, this is why I don't intend to watch the second half of the Hogfather TV adaptation until I've read the book, because I was so bored and so irritated by it when I watched the first half, which is when it originally aired. It was aired in 2 halves, so you had to wait a few days or a week or whatever to see the second part, that I couldn't bring myself to watch the second half. They just got Discworld wrong. But But weirdly enough, that makes me really look forward to the book. I don't know why it's different for this than it was for Wyrd Sisters. I think it's maybe the amount of enthusiasm that fans have for the book, and maybe honestly it could just be the colour palette or something like that. It might be the cover. Yeah, I think I just like the cover, really. Honestly, I really think it might be to do with the colour scheme. How it looks all sort of night-timey and, well, Christmassy. But for whatever reason, I'm really looking forward to reading that one, and I'm definitely not going to stop until I get at least there, by which point it will be ridiculous to stop at all. Whereas Wyrd Sisters just feels sort of grey to me, and greyish green. It's got a lot of stone in it. Couldn't be bothered. So I can't give you very much about Wyrd Sisters except to say that I'm just as disappointed in myself as you are in me, that my ability to get over my weird baggage of Discworld adaptation prejudice failed entirely, and I wasn't really able to pay enough attention to the book when I was reading it. It just washed over me. It was fine though, and you'll probably like it. And that's why it's taken me so long to make this video. Nothing I can say about the book is fair. It doesn't have anything to do with the book. I don't really remember what the book's about. It's got Shakespeare gags in it, and I like myself a Shakespeare gag. Anyone who came to my wedding knows that. If you're wondering about reading this one, it's a sort of a joke about some witches going to see Macbeth / Hamlet, but it's also sort of real, and there's destiny involved, and it's good. It was a good one. I enjoyed it. Sort of. I just didn't pay attention. And perhaps part of the reason why I wasn't able to connect was that for some reason I was also dreading the next book in the series, Pyramids. Last time I tried to read the Discworlds, I do remember getting to Pyramids and finding it to be a real slog. I think I dropped out very shortly after this. So imagine my delight then when this book happened to give me exactly the book that I sort of, unbeknownst to myself, secretly really wanted at that exact moment. I don't know what it was about this one, but it really hit the spot. Or rather, it hit a few different unconnected spots, which some might use as a criticism of the book for being a bit multi-directional, but not me. I've got nothing against a few different things being chucked into a book together, so here are some of the things that this book, Pyramids, has chucked into it. Assassins! It's easy to forget here on the internet that the Assassin's Creed series did not create the kind of assassins that you find in those games. The hooded, parkouring, knife-throwing type who shimmies along drain pipes and disappears into the shadows. That was already an archetype, and Pratchett decides to really delve into it and parody it a bit in the opening chapters of this one. Here we've got an assassin in training at the Assassin's Guild, already alluded to in previous books but not brought front and centre until this one, and Terry completely nails it. I had stacks of fun reading about how assassins are trained, to the point where reading the book actually pretty much forced my hand, and I ended up playing Assassin's Creed for the first time. Ancient Egypt! Yeah! Ancient Egypt is a big well of fun ideas, and Terry's yanked up a great big bucket full of them for this book. He's got pyramid architects and builders competing with one another to build the grandest and most gigantic pyramid ever constructed, but in this book pyramids actually tap into creepy supernatural forces, and in this one the absolute biggest and most powerful one ever is being built. And there follows a whole book of consequences, in which Terry chucks a load of really wicked ideas at our eager faces about what terrible magic a giant space-time rending pyramid can really unleash if the builders cut a few corners when it comes to the safety valves. And also there's a bad guy whose bad guyness is very, very human, but he also has some magic to play with, that's always good Pratchetting. So yeah, something tells me that because of how popular the witches are, you're all going to be cross with me because Wyrd Sisters is the better book compared to Pyramids, and maybe it is, I don't know, but whatever. I was in a funny mood and I just enjoyed Pyramids more. I found it to be more fun. Didn't really care about Wyrd Sisters, did really care about Pyramids. So there you go. There you go, 2 more Discworld books. And now I get to read Guards, which is another one that I saw first as an adaptation before reading the book. I don't think I have ever read the book. I think I may have listened to the audiobook once, but I wasn't really paying attention to it. I wasn't really listening. And I find the audiobook similarly to be a bit... I think Tony Robinson is exactly the person you should get to read audiobooks of Pratchett. They picked correctly there. But he does do the comedy nasal voices a lot, and also I think something rather more to do with the amount that they are abridged. Something of the atmosphere of Discworld isn't in the audiobooks to my mind. One of my previous attempts at reading through the Discworld series was via audiobook, and I never quite felt the sort of the warmth that I do when I read the actual books. But that's not what I'm talking about. My first experience of Guards was via a community theatre play version of it, in which my younger brother played Death But everyone in it was very young. It was a sort of teenagers and down production. But also because the costuming and sets and so on were very sparse, I didn't really get a real sense of where it was set and so on. So I'll probably have a completely different experience when I'm reading it than I did when I was watching the play. For an example, I've since found out that apparently the first point-and-click adventure game is quite heavily based on Guards, and I didn't make that connection at the time. Even though, you know, when the play was happening was not long, really. It was a few years after I played the PC game. So, again, I just obviously wasn't paying attention. So this time I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to read Guards, but not straight away. You may have noticed that this is not a series that I bound gazelle-like from video to video. Simply put, I read the Discworld books in between other books, when perhaps the next book in my reading queue is maybe a little bit too serious and I'm not in the mood. I don't think it'll be too long before I read Guards, because I'm quite into the idea of reading it soon, but, you know, we'll just have to see, won't we? But anyway, in the meantime, I'll do other things, so you can come and see me. I'm at the moment, I don't know if you've seen that I've got a Bulmer's Bookshelf channel at the moment, and I'm using it to go through Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson, a chapter at a time. So if you've read that and you're a fan of it, then do come over to Bulmer's Bookshelf, the channel, and we shall enjoy that together. But anyway, in whatever capacity, I shall see you quite soon, I hope. Goodbye! Oh, a question for Discworld fans before I go. I could ask this in the next one, but I'll probably forget. After Guards, I believe the next book in the series, technically, is Faust Eric. But I hear a lot of voices telling me that that's not a proper Discworld book and that I don't need to read it. But then you hear some who disagree, of course, and so I'm basically asking you, if you are a Discworld fan, should I read Eric? There is a further complication in the fact that I know that the book is originally and supposed to be rather illustration heavy. It is pretty much a picture book, and I have only the paperback words-only version of it, the version which one wonders why it was produced at all. Actually, that being said, I think we might have the real version at home. We probably do. Dad was collecting these things throughout the 80s when they were coming out. When did this come out? Oh, crikey, I love the first 2 paragraphs, though. Oh, that's lovely. Oh, now I'm buzzing about reading Guards. You know, some people don't like his style, but if you do like his style, it's just, oh, it's lovely. Oh, it's lovely, his writing style. It's just nice. It's like Christmas in the 90s. It's like being back home. Oh, there's not going to be any Discworld books for Christmas anymore. That was always a good bit of Christmas, wasn't it? Oh.